The Empress ate in silence, as she had for 11 years. Her private dining chamber sat at the apex of the Vel'kari royal spire, its crystalline walls offering a panoramic view of the capital city below, a privilege no other living soul was permitted to share. The long table before her could seat 40. Tonight, as every night, 39 chairs remained empty. Empress Saelith Voranthus lifted a thin slice of preserved starfruit to her lips, her movements precise, economical. The ceremonial robes pooled around her like spilled ink, black trimmed with silver thread that caught the dying light of the twin suns. She did not taste the food. She had stopped tasting food years ago. A soft chime interrupted her ritual solitude. Empress. The voice belonged to High Steward Valorn, crackling through the chamber's communication array. The human delegation has arrived. There is a complication. Saelith set down her utensil with deliberate care. Explain. Ambassador Chen has fallen ill. A respiratory infection, their physicians claim. Non-contagious, but debilitating. They have sent a replacement for tonight's reception, his personal aide. An aide. The word carried the weight of insult. The Vel'kari did not send aides to treat with empresses. His name, Marcus Webb. 32 cycles by their reckoning. No diplomatic credentials. He was apparently a grief counselor before joining the ambassador's staff. A grief counselor. Saelith almost laughed. Almost. The humans had sent her a grief counselor. Whether this was cosmic irony or a calculated insult, she could not determine. Proceed with the reception. I will observe from the gallery. She would not attend, of course. An empress did not welcome aides. But she would watch, as she watched everything, from behind walls of glass and protocol. The reception hall blazed with light and carefully orchestrated splendor. Vel'kari nobles in their clan colors moved through the space like schools of exotic fish, their conversations a constant murmur of political maneuvering. At the center of it all stood a single human. Marcus Webb was not what Saelith had expected. He was neither tall nor imposing. His formal attire, clearly borrowed, slightly too large at the shoulders, marked him as an afterthought. He held no drink, accepted no food, and spoke to no one. The Vel'kari parted around him like water around a stone, their dismissal almost physical in its completeness. Saelith watched him stand alone for 17 minutes. She counted. Then something unexpected happened. A young server, barely past her adolescent molt, likely from one of the lesser houses working off a family debt, stumbled near the human. The tray she carried, laden with delicate glass vessels of ceremonial wine, crashed to the floor in a cascade of shattering crystal. The hall fell silent. Saelith knew what would happen next. The girl would be dismissed, her family's debt doubled as punishment. The nobles would pretend they had seen nothing, because to acknowledge a servant's failure was beneath them. The human would step back, disgusted by the display. Marcus Webb knelt. He knelt on the polished floor among the broken glass and began helping the servant girl collect the shards. His hands moved carefully, precisely, and when a piece sliced his palm, he simply continued working, his blood mixing with the spilled wine. It's all right, he said, his voice carrying in the shocked silence. Accidents happen. Here, let me help you. The server girl stared at him with undisguised terror. No noble had ever knelt for a servant. No guest had ever bled for one. You shouldn't, she whispered. Your hand, it's just a cut. He smiled at her, and something in that smile made Saelith's chest tighten. I've had worse. Let's get this cleaned up before someone steps on it, yeah? High Lord Dravith, master of the third house and Saelith's most persistent political opponent, stepped forward with a sneer, curling his thin lips. The human contaminates himself with servants' work, he announced, loud enough for all to hear. Perhaps this is why their species remains in the lower tiers of galactic civilization. They do not understand the proper order of things. Marcus looked up. His expression was mild, almost pleasant. The proper order of things? Status. Hierarchy died T. The natural separation between those who serve and those who command. Dravith's contempt was a living thing. Surely even humans understand this basic principle. Oh, I understand it. Marcus rose slowly, a bloody glass shard still in his hand. I just don't agree with it. Where I come from, a person's worth isn't measured by who kneels for whom. It's measured by whether they'll help someone who's having a bad day. Dravith's face contorted. You dare, I dare to pick up broken glass, yes. Terrifying, I know. Marcus turned his back on the High Lord, a gesture of profound disrespect in Vel'kari culture, and helped the server girl to her feet. What's your name, Lethani, sir? She was trembling. Lethani Daitoi. That's pretty. Are you all right? Yes. I don't understand. Why would you help me? Marcus smiled again. That same gentle expression that seemed to reshape the air around him, because you needed help. That's all. That's ever the only reason. From her gallery, Empress Saelith Vorantis watched a human bleed for a servant girl and felt something ancient and frozen begin to crack inside her chest. That night, for reasons she could not articulate, Saelith descended from her spire. She told herself it was duty, a diplomatic necessity to assess this strange human who had so thoroughly disrupted her court. She walked the lower halls alone, her guards dismissed, her presence unannounced. The palace at night was a different creature, shadows pooling in corners, the hum of life support systems the only sound. She found him in the tertiary garden, the one reserved for junior diplomats and visiting staff. He sat on a stone bench beneath a bioluminescent tree, its blue-green glow casting strange patterns across his borrowed clothes. His injured hand was wrapped in a rough bandage, clearly self-applied. He was crying. Saelith had seen many things in her reign. She had seen wars and peace accords, betrayals and sacrifices, the birth of stars and the death of worlds. She had never seen a foreign diplomat weep alone in a garden at night. She should have left. Protocol demanded it. An empress did not witness weakness. She exploited it or ignored it. Instead, she spoke. "Why are you crying, human?" Marcus startled, turning to face her. His eyes, wet, reddened, widened as recognition struck. "Your Majesty. I'm sorry, I should." He moved to stand, to bow, to perform the dozen gestures of deference that her presence demanded. "Sit." It was not a request. She moved closer, though every instinct screamed caution. "I asked you a question." Marcus sat. He wiped his face with his uninjured hand, a gesture so human and unguarded that Saelith felt briefly disoriented. "I was thinking about my sister," he said finally. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer, a disease. We have cures now, but she didn't get to the hospital in time. She died alone in her apartment, and no one found her for 2 days." Saelith stood very still. "I became a grief counselor after that," Marcus continued, his voice steadier now. "Because I couldn't save her, but maybe I could help other people. And then the ambassador offered me this position, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. That maybe seeing the stars would help. That maybe I could outrun it. And has it helped? No?" He laughed, a broken sound. "The stars don't care about grief. They don't care about anything. And tonight, at the reception, everyone was so cold. So perfectly, beautifully cold. And I thought about Lethani, that server girl, how scared she was. And I thought about my sister eating dinner alone in her apartment, night after night, because she was too proud to tell anyone she was sick. And He trailed off. The garden hummed with bioluminescent life. "Because no one should eat alone," he said finally, the words cracking in his throat. "That's why I'm crying. Because my sister died alone, and that girl was going to be destroyed for dropping a tray, and your whole damn planet seems designed to make sure everyone is as isolated as possible, and I couldn't stop." Saelith's voice was sharp. Enough to cut. Marcus flinched. For a long moment, the Empress of the Vel'kari stood silent, her face unreadable, her silver-threaded robes pooling around her like shadow-given form. Then she did something she had not done in 11 years. She sat down. Not on the bench, that would be too intimate, too sudden. But she lowered herself to the garden's edge, her back against the bioluminescent tree, her robes spreading across the grass like a fallen night sky. "My husband died 11 years ago," she said. "Assassinated. Poison in his wine during our bonding anniversary feast. I watched him die across a table set for 2, and I could not reach him in time. The physician said he was dead before he struck the floor." Marcus stared at her. "Since that night," Saelith continued, "I have eaten alone. It is safer. More appropriate. The nobles approve. An empress in mourning is an empress who cannot be manipulated through attachment." Her voice was hollow, reciting facts rather than speaking truth. "I have not shared a meal with another living soul in 11 years. That's..." Marcus stopped. Started again. "That's not mourning. That's self-destruction. Yes." The word hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. "I know," Saelith said. "I have always known, but knowing and stopping are different things, and there has been no one who would." She could not finish the sentence. She was not sure how. The human, this strange, weeping, glass-stained human, looked at her with something she could not identify. Not pity. Not fear. Not the careful calculation of every courtier and diplomat she had ever known. Compassion? It was compassion. "Have you eaten tonight?" he asked. "What? Dinner? Have you had dinner?" Saelith blinked. "I began to." In my chambers. Before the reception. So that's a no. Marcus stood slowly, favoring his injured hand. Well, I haven't eaten either. The Vel'kari canopies at the reception smelled amazing, but I couldn't figure out which ones were going to send me into anaphylactic shock, so I skipped them. He offered her his unbandaged hand. There's got to be a kitchen somewhere in this palace. Come on. Let's find something we can both eat, and maybe neither of us has to eat alone tonight. Saelith looked at his hand. It was scarred, she noticed. Not just from tonight, but from years of small injuries, work that left marks. The hand of someone who had never been afraid to reach out. This is highly irregular, she said. I know. The court will talk. They're already talking. Apparently I committed about 15 acts of social treason at the reception. My guards will not approve. I'm a grief counselor with a cut hand. I think you can take me. Saelith felt something strange on her face. It took her a moment to recognize it as a smile. Small, tentative, but real. She took his hand. The palace kitchens at night were a revelation. Marcus had expected something sterile and automated. Vel'kari technology was centuries ahead of Earth's in most respects. Instead, he found a warm, chaotic space filled with copper pots, hanging herbs from 6 different worlds, and a single elderly cook who took one look at the Empress and nearly fainted into a vat of fermenting grain. Peace, Saelith, Saelith said, and her voice was gentler than Marcus had heard it. We are merely hungry. No protocols. No announcements. Just food ID. Meili, a stout Vel'kari woman with scales that had faded to a soft gray, recovered with admirable speed. Within minutes, she had cleared a small prep table, produced 2 mismatched stools, and begun assembling what she called nightbread, a dense, slightly sweet loaf that she assured Marcus would not trigger any human allergies. I've fed diplomats before, she said, slicing the bread with practiced efficiency. Humans, Drathkai, even one of those gas beings from the Outer Rim. You learn which proteins to avoid. They ate in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of rising dough and preserved starfruit, with a cook who kept refilling their cups of warm grain tea and pretending not to watch her Empress with undisguised wonder. This is good, Marcus said, and meant it. The bread was rich and nutty, with a texture somewhere between sourdough and pound cake. Really good. Meili has been the palace's night cook for 40 years, Saelith said. She taught me to make this bread when I was a child. You can cook. I was not always an empress. Saelith's hands wrapped around her cup, her long fingers tracing the rim. Before I was bonded to Vel'kari, I was 3rd daughter of a minor house. Our rank was low enough that we were expected to learn practical skills, cooking, gardening, repair work. That's not what I expected. The Vel'kari value practical knowledge more than most species realize. Status is one thing. Survival is another. She took a small bite of bread, and Marcus noticed that her movements had softened, losing some of the rigid precision that seemed to define her. Vel'kari fell in love with me because I could rebuild a malfunctioning water purifier. He thought it was the most attractive thing he had ever seen. She smiled at the memory, and the smile transformed her face. The cold, distant Empress was gone. In her place sat a woman who had loved someone and lost him, and who still carried that loss like a stone in her chest. He sounds like he was a good man, Marcus said. He was. He was kind in a world that punishes kindness. He believed that power should be used to protect, not control. The nobles hated him for it. Her smile faded. That is why they killed him. Do you know who? I have suspicions. No proof. The investigation was contained. The word carried centuries of bitter meaning. An empress without a bondmate is easier to control. They had no interest in finding the truth. Marcus set down his bread. That's monstrous. That is politics. No, it's monstrous. Someone murdered your husband and everyone just pretended it didn't happen. They let you suffer alone for 11 years because it was convenient? Saelith looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. You feel things very strongly, Marcus Webb. Someone should. And this is normal? For humans? For some of us. He thought of his sister, of her quiet funeral attended by 3 people, and a priest who mispronounced her name. Not enough of us. But some. They ate in silence for a while. Meili hummed softly in the background, preparing tomorrow's bread, giving them the gift of privacy without abandonment. Tell me about your sister, Saelith said finally. If you wish. Marcus hadn't spoken about Jenny in months. The words came slowly at first, then faster, tumbling over each other like water over rocks. He told her about Jenny's laugh, too loud for polite company. About her obsession with old detective novels and her terrible cooking, and the way she could light up any room just by walking into it. He told her about the diagnosis, late stage, already spreading, and how Jenny had hidden it because she didn't want to be a burden. He told her about the 2 days after her death, when he had called her number 17 times because he couldn't accept that no one would answer. She was my best friend, he said. And I didn't save her. I was a grief counselor. I was supposed to help people, and I couldn't even help my own sister. Saelith reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her skin was cool, scaled in places where his was smooth, but the pressure was firm and real. You were not there because she chose not to let you be there, she said. That is not failure. That is love, honoring another's choice, even when it breaks you. Marcus stared at their hands. Has anyone ever told you that you're pretty wise for a cold, distant empress? No. Most people are too afraid to call me cold to my face. He laughed, a real laugh, surprising himself. Well, consider this my official diplomatic assessment. Cold on the outside, suspiciously warm on the inside. I will have you executed for that observation. Worth it. They smiled at each other across the scarred kitchen table, two people who had no business sharing this moment, but who had. Found each other anyway. The next 3 days were a careful dance. Marcus attended diplomatic functions as Ambassador Chen's official representative, a role that placed him precisely nowhere in the Vel'kari hierarchy. He was not important enough to insult directly, not unimportant enough to ignore completely. He existed in a strange middle space that left the nobles uncertain how to treat him. He treated them all the same, with genuine interest, patient questions, and an absolute refusal to participate in their endless status games. You're infuriating, High Lord Dravith told him at the second reception, cornering him near a display of ancient star maps. You treat my daughter with the same courtesy you show the servants. Should I not? My daughter is heir to the third house. Servants are servants. Your daughter seems lonely, Marcus said mildly. She's been standing by that window for 20 minutes because no one her age will talk to her. The servant who brought her drink was kinder to her than any noble in this room. Maybe your hierarchy isn't working as well as you think it is. Dravith's face darkened. You understand nothing of our ways. Maybe. Or maybe I understand them too well. Marcus picked up a passing canopy. He'd finally learned which ones were safe and bit into it. These are excellent, by the way. My compliments to whoever made them. From her gallery, Saelith watched Marcus Webb navigate her court like a gentle storm, disrupting everything he touched without seeming to notice. She watched her nobles grow increasingly unsettled, their certainties shaking. And each night, after the formal events had ended, she descended to the tertiary garden. He was always waiting. They talked for hours, about Earth and Vel'kar, about grief and duty, about the small kindnesses that held civilizations together when grand gestures failed. Marcus taught her card games from his homeworld. She taught him the names of stars in the old Vel'kari tongue. He listened to her speak of Vel'kari without offering platitudes or solutions. She listened to him speak of Jenny without trying to fix what could not be fixed. On the third night, sitting beneath the bioluminescent tree that had become their unofficial meeting place, Saelith realized she was in danger. Not physical danger. Something worse. You're going to leave soon, she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Marcus, who had been describing an earth flower called a sunflower, paused. Ambassador Chen's infection is clearing up. He'll be ready to take over in a few days. Yes. And then I'll go back to being his aide. Background noise. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, not exactly Empress visiting material. No, aide. It would be highly inappropriate. The court would talk. They already are. Something shifted in the air between them, a tension that had been building for days, carefully ignored. Saelith, Marcus said, and it was the first time he had used her name without her title. What is this? What are we doing? She could lie. She was skilled at lying. 11 years of survival had taught her every variation of deception. I do not know, she said instead, but I find that I do not want it to stop. Marcus's hand found hers in the darkness. Their fingers interlaced, his warm skin against her cool scales, and for a moment neither of them breathed. Neither do I, he said. They sat together in silence, watching the bioluminescent leaves sway in an artificial breeze, and did not speak of what came next, because neither of them knew how to survive it. The crisis came without warning. On the morning of the 5th day, Marcus woke to shouting in the diplomatic quarters. He stumbled into the hallway to find Ambassador Chen, still pale, still coughing, but very much on his feet, surrounded by security officers in full combat armor. What's happening? Chen turned to him with an expression Marcus had never seen before, fear. The Vel'kari Council has accused humanity of conspiracy. They're saying we orchestrated the Empress's husband's assassination 11 years ago. Chen grabbed Marcus's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. They're demanding we submit to questioning. All of us. Now. That's insane. We didn't even have significant contact with the Vel'kari 11 years ago. Our first formal treaty was signed 3 years later. I know that. You know that. But someone has produced evidence, falsified I'm sure, that places human agents at the scene. Chen's voice dropped. This is a coup, Marcus. Someone is using humanity as a scapegoat to destabilize the Empress. And we're trapped in the middle of it. The interrogation chambers were buried deep beneath the palace, in a section of the spire that Marcus hadn't known existed. Cold metal walls, harsh lighting, the hum of suppression fields designed to dampen any attempt at communication or escape. They separated the human delegation immediately. Marcus found himself alone in a featureless room, waiting for questions that never came. Hours passed. Then, a day. Then, 2. They gave him water but no food. They turned the lights too bright, then too dim. They let silence stretch until he began to doubt his own thoughts. Classic techniques. Marcus had trained in crisis psychology. He recognized what they were doing. It didn't make it easier to endure. On the 3rd day, the door finally opened. High Lord Draveth entered with 2 armed guards and a smile that made Marcus's stomach turn. The human who shows kindness to servants, Draveth said, settling into the chair across from Marcus. Tell me, do you also show kindness to assassins, to conspirators against the crown? I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course, you don't. Humans are so skilled at playing innocent. Draveth leaned forward. We have evidence, Mr. Webb. Communications, financial records, testimony from witnesses who saw human operatives on the night of Emperor Velaric's death. The case against your species is damning. If you had real evidence, you wouldn't need to interrogate me. You'd have already gone public. Draveth's smile flickered. The evidence is being verified. For the protection of the Empress, of course. We wouldn't want to act hastily. The Empress. Marcus forced himself to speak carefully, to show nothing. Does she know about these accusations? The Empress has been informed? She is, naturally devastated by this betrayal, particularly given her recent association with a certain human delegate. The implication was clear enough. Draveth wasn't just accusing humanity, he was using Marcus to destroy Saelith. Whatever connection they had formed, whatever moments they had shared, it would all be twisted into evidence of conspiracy. She had nothing to do with me, Marcus said. I'm a grief counselor. I pick up broken glass and eat bread in kitchens. That's all. Is it? Draveth stood, straightening his ceremonial robes. The Empress has been seen speaking with you privately, multiple times, in violation of every protocol governing contact between a grieving monarch and foreign nationals. He paused at the door. When we present our evidence to the council, her authority will be questioned. Her judgment will be doubted. And when she is removed from power, well, humanity will answer for its crimes. The door sealed behind him, and Marcus was alone again. Saelith learned of her husband's supposed murderers from a formal council summons. She stood in her private chambers, reading the document 3 times because she could not believe the words. Human conspirators. Evidence of foreign involvement. A request that she recuse herself from the investigation due to her emotional compromise regarding the accused species. Draveth. It had always been Draveth. She had suspected him 11 years ago, but suspicion without proof was worthless in the Vel'kari court. Now he had found a way to destroy her, and he was using the one thing she had allowed herself to care about since Velaric's death. Marcus. She summoned her personal guard, loyalists, chosen for their bond to her rather than their house allegiances, and gave orders she had never thought she would give. Find him. Bring him to me. And if anyone tries to stop you, remind them that their Empress still commands the Crown Guard. The rescue was not clean. 4 guards dead, 2 of hers, 2 of Draveth's private soldiers. A running battle through the lower corridors of the palace. Marcus, half-starved and disoriented, being carried by soldiers he didn't recognize to a destination he couldn't imagine. They brought him to her personal chambers, the ones at the top of the spire where she had eaten alone for 11 years. He collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, trying to make sense of what had happened. Saelith, do not speak. She was checking him for injuries, her hands moving over his arms, his face, searching for damage. You are dehydrated, possibly concussed. Melee is bringing food. You will eat. There's a coup happening. Draveth. I know what Draveth is doing. I have always known what Draveth is capable of. I simply never expected him to be this bold. Her voice was hard, controlled, but her hands were shaking. He is using you to destroy me. And I cannot allow that. Then let me go. Marcus caught her hands, stilling them. Send me back to the human delegation. Distance yourself. I'm not worth losing your throne over. Saelith stared at him with silver eyes that held more emotion than she had allowed herself to feel in over a decade. You are worth more than you know, Marcus Webb. You are worth more than a throne that has brought me nothing but isolation. You looked at a servant girl and saw a person. You looked at me and saw She stopped, struggling with words that did not exist in her language. Someone who shouldn't eat alone, he finished quietly. Yes. She pulled her hands free, not to retreat, but to cup his face. Her cool fingers traced his jaw, his cheekbones, the human features that were so alien and so strangely familiar. I am going to fight for my throne, she said. Not because I want power, but because someone must protect this world from those who would use it for cruelty. And when I have one, if I win, I would very much like you to stay. Not as a diplomat. Not as an aide. As someone who reminds me why power matters at all. Marcus's breath caught. That's not how these things work. I'm a human. You're an empress. The galaxy doesn't just, the galaxy will adjust. Saelith leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his, a Vel'kari gesture of profound intimacy that she had not shared with anyone since Vel'kari, or it will burn. But I will not lose another person I care about, because politics demanded it. Not again. Marcus raised his hand, bandaged and scarred, and placed it over her heart. He could feel the triple rhythm of her pulse, faster than a human's, steadier than his own. Okay, he whispered. Okay, then let's fight. The Great Council convened at dawn. The Chamber of Resolution sat at the heart of the palace, a vast circular space where every major decision in Vel'kari history had been debated and decided. Tiered seating rose in concentric rings, each level representing a higher rank in the noble hierarchy. At the center stood a raised platform where the accused would face their judges. Today, the chamber was packed beyond capacity. Every noble family, every minor house, every political faction had sent representatives to witness the fall of an empress. High Lord Dravith stood at the prosecution's position, resplendent in his house colors, surrounded by legal advisors and witnesses. His expression radiated confidence. Empress Saelith entered alone. She wore not her ceremonial robes, but the simple working clothes of her childhood house, the garments of someone who could repair water purifiers and bake bread and survive without the trappings of power. The nobles murmured in confusion and contempt. The accused empress appears in the garb of a servant, Dravith announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. Perhaps this is fitting, given her demonstrated preference for human company over Vel'kari dignity. The accused empress, Saelith replied, her voice steady, appears as who she is. Not a symbol. Not a tool. A person who has served her people for 11 years while those around her plotted and maneuvered and allowed her husband's murderer to walk free. The chamber fell silent. I am not here to defend humanity, she continued. I am here to expose a lie. High Lord Dravith claims to have evidence of human involvement in my bondmaid's death. I ask only one question. Who provided this evidence? Dravith's smile flickered, then steadied. Multiple sources. Witnesses. Financial records. The documentation is thorough and verified. Verified by whom? By the Third House's intelligence apparatus, of course. The most reliable, the Third House. Saelith's voice sharpened. Your house, Lord Dravith. Your apparatus. Your verification of evidence that you yourself produced. Murmurs swept through the assembled nobles. Dravith raised a hand for silence. The Empress attempts to deflect from her own compromised judgment. She has been seen consorting with the human delegate Marcus Webb, a known associate of the accused conspirators. Her objectivity. My objectivity died with my husband. Saelith stepped forward, and something in her bearing made the guards at the chamber's edges shift nervously. I have never claimed objectivity, Lord Dravith. What I claimed was patience. 11 years of patience, waiting for the man who poisoned Vel'kari to grow bold enough to expose himself. She raised her hand, and the chamber's holographic display activated. Documents appeared in the air. Financial transfers, communication logs, witness statements. The poison that killed my husband came from the Trath system, Saelith said. A rare compound, difficult to synthesize, impossible to trace unless one knows where to look. Third House has a mining operation in the Trath system. They have had access to this compound for 30 years. More documents. More evidence. The noble houses began to whisper urgently among themselves. The servant who delivered my husband's wine that night was found dead 3 days later. An apparent suicide. Except that her family received a substantial payment from an anonymous benefactor the following week, a payment that can be traced through 17 shell accounts to Third House discretionary funds. Dravith's face had gone pale. These are fabrications, and the witnesses who claimed to have seen human operatives at the palace that night? Saelith's voice rose, cutting through his protests. 2 are dead. 1 has disappeared. The 4th is Vel'kari Dravith, your youngest son, who was 14 years old at the time of the assassination, and could not possibly have observed what he now claims to have seen. The chamber erupted. Dravith shouted for order, but the damage was done. 11 years of suppressed suspicion, 11 years of careful doubt came flooding out in accusations and counter-accusations. The noble houses that had supported Dravith began backing away, distancing themselves from a suddenly toxic alliance. And in the chaos, Marcus Webb entered the chamber of resolution. He walked slowly, still weak from his imprisonment, but his back was straight and his expression calm. The nobles parted before him, not in respect, but in uncertainty. No one knew what protocol applied to a human in these circumstances. He reached the central platform and stood beside the Empress. "For the record," he said, his voice carrying surprisingly well in the cavernous space, "I'm a grief counselor from Earth. I pick up broken glass, I eat bread in kitchens, and I believe that no one should eat alone. I did not assassinate anyone. I don't have the skill set for it." Scattered laughter, quickly suppressed. "But I did come to understand something during my time here." He turned to face Dravith, who was being restrained by his own advisors. "You people have built an empire on the idea that status determines worth. That hierarchy protects stability. That isolation is safer than connection." He looked at Saelith, and in his eyes was everything they had shared in late-night gardens and kitchen conversations. "But isolation just makes it easier for predators to hunt. It makes it easier for grief to become a cage. It makes it easier to believe that no one will help you, so why bother asking?" He reached out and took her hand, there in front of the entire Vel'kari Council, in a gesture that violated every rule of diplomatic conduct ever written. "Humanity isn't better than the Vel'kari. We're not smarter, or stronger, or more moral. But we do one thing that seems to confuse everybody here. We reach out. Even when it costs us. Even when it hurts. Because connection is worth the risk, and nobody, not empresses, not servants, not visiting diplomats with borrowed clothes and cut hands, nobody should have to be alone." Silence. Then, slowly, Empress Saelith for Anthis turned to face her council. "I intend to pursue formal charges against High Lord Dravith for conspiracy, murder, and treason against the crown. I will request an independent investigation by the 4th and 7th houses, with human technical assistance to verify all evidence. And I will propose a formal alliance with Earth's diplomatic corps, not as a subordinate relationship, but as a partnership between equals." She paused. "Additionally, I intend to accept Marcus Webb as my personal advisor on matters of cultural exchange and emotional support. He will eat meals with me, publicly, without apologizing for it." The council stared at her. "This is highly irregular," said the matriarch of the 4th house. "Yes," Saelith agreed. "It is. But I have been regular for 11 years, and it nearly destroyed me. I think perhaps it is time to try something new." The trial of High Lord Dravith lasted 3 months. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to permanent exile in the outer reaches. His house was disbanded, its assets distributed among the lesser families who had suffered under his schemes. The alliance between Vel'kari and Earth was ratified 2 months after that. It was not perfect, no alliance ever was, but it marked the beginning of something genuinely new, a partnership built not on dominance or desperation, but on the radical notion that two civilizations might actually like each other. Marcus stayed. He never received a formal title. Vel'kari hierarchy still didn't know quite what to do with him. But he attended council sessions at the Empress's side. He trained palace staff in crisis intervention and grief support, Dial. He continued eating meals with Saelith, publicly and unapologetically, and every time a noble complained about protocol, he smiled and passed them the bread. On the first anniversary of their meeting, Saelith invited Marcus to the tertiary garden. The bioluminescent tree cast its blue-green glow across their faces as they sat together on the familiar stone bench. "I have a gift for you," she said. She handed him a small box, carved from the wood of a tree that had grown on her childhood estate. Inside was a ring, not ornate, not ceremonial, but simple and strong, designed to fit a human finger. "It is not a bonding ring," she said quickly, before he could speak. "We are not there yet, I think. But it is a promise ring. A symbol that I choose to keep you close. That I do not intend to eat alone again, as long as you are willing to share my table." Marcus turned the ring over in his hands. The metal was warm, almost alive, inscribed with words in the old Vel'kari tongue. "What does it say?" "It says, because no one should eat alone." Saelith's voice softened. "I thought perhaps those words deserved to be remembered." Marcus slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. "You know," he said, "when I first came here, I thought the Vel'kari were cold, distant, inhuman, in the worst possible way, and now I think you're just hurt. Like everyone else. Like me." He took her hand, their fingers interlacing in the way that had become as natural as breathing. "And I think that maybe healing happens when someone is brave enough to reach out first." Saelith leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. Her scales were cool against his skin, her breath steady, her presence more real than anything he had felt since his sister's death. I am glad you picked up that broken glass, she said. So am I. Above them, the twin moons of Vel'kari rose over the garden, casting silver light through the bioluminescent leaves. In the palace behind them, servants and nobles alike were learning new ways to speak to each other. Across the galaxy, diplomats were negotiating treaties that would have been unthinkable a year ago. And in a small garden, at the heart of an empire, an empress and a grief counselor shared the simple miracle of not being alone. The stars watched, as they always did. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, they watched something hopeful.